So, I started my MMO journey almost a year ago, believe it or not, and I started it with Final Fantasy XI. Now, I had played MMOs very sparsely when I was younger. I played a little bit of RuneScape, maybe less than 5 minutes of World of Warcraft, and I vaguely remember playing City of Heroes, but that was really it. I think my parents were hesitant to let me play MMOs along with my siblings as well. And Mom and Dad, if you're watching, I think that was definitely the right call because they can certainly be addicting, especially when you're that age. I mean, Final Fantasy XI, when it boots up, reminds you to spend time with your family, friends, and to make sure you're not missing work because of the game. So I really didn't get to experience MMOs until about a year ago when I started this channel shortly after. And I started with Final Fantasy XI because I think that was the one that sounded the most interesting to me. I listened to a show called Ultima Final Fantasy, and that was a podcast that my favorite episodes of theirs are the Final Fantasy XI content. Just because how they talked about the game itself and playing it with other players, I was like, okay, I love Final Fantasy, and I think as far as like not being interested in MMOs, I was like, I'll give this one and eventually 14 a shot. So I started Final Fantasy 11, and it didn't start off amazing. Um, the game felt tedious, long, difficult. Um, I felt lost very often, and on top of that, I was also trying to stream with a laptop that can barely run Windows Movie Maker, let alone run a game and stream it at the same time. So it's like you watch my first 10 to 15 live streams, you'll notice that they'll crash out of nowhere, um, and the game will just drop. Luckily, I don't have that problem anymore. But it was around like oddly enough, level 30, and then also maybe the 30-hour mark into playing Final Fantasy 11, that something just clicked. And I have to give praise to a player that helped me out, who's unfortunately I can't recall their name anymore, who gave me about 3 million gil to play around with, which made buying the maps that I needed for Final Fantasy 11, because that was another thing that was really difficult, was trying to find my way around in that game because it's so big, and the NPCs give very vague directions. So in order to find your way around in that game, you've got to either look up a walkthrough or guide. The Final Fantasy 11 guide is a godsend. And that's created by the player base. As far as I know, Square has nothing to do with the making of that. And then, just talking to players, it felt like and still does feel like a multiplayer game. And that's what I really love about it. And that's why I come back to it. I've not felt a sense of addiction, at least to my knowledge. I find myself being able to very easily tear myself away from the game. And I use the expression tear myself away, um, very loosely, because it wasn't like I had to force myself to stop. It was like, okay, I've been playing for an hour or two. I think it's time to stop. And sometimes I would go a little bit longer, but it wasn't like it was consistent for me to spend days on the game and not talk to my fiance, my family, or skip out work. Because I've heard, through talking to other players, I've heard people talk about how they played the game in the past and how they would call off work for it. And that never even crossed my mind to do that with Final Fantasy XI, this MMO, let alone any other games that I've ever played. The closest thing I've ever done to that is I asked off time ahead of time, like months ahead of time, to play Expedition 33 for a day. But it wasn't like I just called off unexpectedly. So I think Final Fantasy XI for me, the combat is okay. The story is very simple. I think that if you're really into the early Final Fantasy games, like Final Fantasy 1, The story, at least for the base game, I haven't gotten to the expansions, and I will get to the expansions because I really do want to play them. Um, you basically you play a character who has been hired by whatever village you start off with, and you're tasked with investigating the beast tribe attacks. And if you find out that this Shadow Lord is behind everything, and that's pretty much it. Like you're trying to stop him and to get the three kingdoms to sort of help each other out. And that's kind of the beginning of the game. I have yet to battle the Shadow Lord. I think I'm pretty close to that part, and then I'll be jumping into the expansions, which I'm excited about, especially Chains of Promathia in particular. When UFF did the coverage on Chains of Promathia, I was like, man, that sounds awesome. Like I can't wait to get to that part. But through the middle of my journey, it was announced that Final Fantasy XIV was coming to Xbox. I'm like, awesome! More Final Fantasy games are now available, or going to be available on Xbox. So I started playing through the free trial of Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm sorry if this video sort of morphs into an 11 versus 14 comparison. I can't help it because I do it on stream too, where when I play 14, I talk about how much I miss playing 11, despite the fact that 14's all right. Like I think it's okay. It's missing the multiplayer part for me. Like, yes, like once you get further into the game, you can go through dungeons and stuff with other players, but everybody's typically off doing their own thing. Like I've not had to rely on another player for help with the game at all. I've been given tips and stuff, but nothing drastic to where I was like, I'm lost. I need to flag somebody down and ask them where to get this item or what I'm supposed to do in this next quest. It was nothing like that. The closest thing I ever got to that was when somebody told me I was leveling up my class wrong, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't want to be useless in dungeons, and I'm still kind of running into that problem, but I'm like, I'm here to experience the story and the game at a face value. At some point, I don't know if I'm going to get into the weeds on what the game actually is or could be. So, I think Final Fantasy XIV's story is also very simple. The Realm Reborn part, the base game. Basically, you pick your kingdom just like at the beginning of Final Fantasy XI, and you start there and you begin learning about this calamity and this masked man and this empire that is behind everything. And you kind of go and you start to sort of join these factions together. And the story's starting to pick up a little bit. I think it's certainly gotten better as I've played along, and reading it aloud on stream is fun. But I still think it's missing the multiplayer part. Like I very rarely interact with anybody else in the game other than when I'm doing dungeons. So I think if you're going to play 14, something that it definitely has over 11 is the free trial is insanely long. You can play the free trial for as long as you want, pretty much, to my knowledge. I believe the level cap is at 70 for the free trial, and I'm at level 47. And basically, you can play the base game and then the two expansions. I think they're up to about 7 expansions for the game in total. So it's a lot of gameplay. Like you can get hundreds of hours without paying a cent for the game, and that's awesome. Final Fantasy XI's free trial is 14 days, which is not enough time to get familiar with the game. I think with Final Fantasy XI, personally, I think the free trial should go all the way up to level 10, maybe. But for 11, you don't really get a sense for what your character can do until you reach level 15 or 20. That's when you start getting fun abilities that you can sort of mishmash together and do interesting combos and damage, and that's when the game really comes alive as far as like combat and stuff. And 14 is kind of that way too, where obviously once you get into the upper levels, that's when your character becomes way more useful and interesting to play. And I'm really excited to get to play a red mage at some point. That's my goal. I'm about 3 levels away from starting that process. So, I think Final Fantasy 11 feels like it has an actual multiplayer feature where it's still, yes, you can play the game kind of on your own, but it's still a good part of the game to interact with the community. Whereas 14, I've pretty much gotten through without having to rely on the community at all. And I think that if 14 wasn't free, like if the free trial wasn't, hey, you can play the first game plus the 2 expansions free of charge, if they were just like, you've got a certain amount of days to play, I think I would just call it good. Like, I wouldn't be playing anymore. But I do, at the very least, want to finish A Realm Reborn, and then I'll move to Final Fantasy 11 and finish the base game at the very least. Because it's just like when I play 14, I'm thinking about Final Fantasy 11. I really enjoy it as an MMO. I don't know if it's because it's an older MMO, that's why the multiplayer is just so prevalent. So I don't know, people, you'll have to comment below whether or not Elder Scrolls Online or World of Warcraft is basically a glorified single-player game with multiplayer aspects. And maybe 14 becomes more multiplayer the longer you play it. But based off of what I've heard from some of my Final Fantasy groups, that doesn't seem to be the case, which is strange to me. It's like, why would you build a multiplayer online game, but have the multiplayer be sort of a side thing? Like, I feel like that would be the main thing. And I don't know, is it because companies think that human beings are so antisocial now? That could very well be it. But I think that if you have a PS4, 5, Xbox Series, or a good PC, I think Final Fantasy 14 is worth checking out. I mean, the free trial is amazing. And I think that it's, at the very least, if you're a Final Fantasy fan and you're like, I'm not touching the MMOs, I think that 14 is something that you could check out and get enough out of, because you're only spending time on it if you decide to just play the base game and then the 2 expansions that are available. And for me, I think at some point I'll want to play the whole game because I'm a completionist and I want to play everything Final Fantasy related. Like that's a bucket list goal of mine. And Final Fantasy 11, I think, definitely takes precedent over 14, but eventually I would like to make through as much of 14's content as I can, at least the story content. I think the side quests, I can definitely take it or leave it. I'm not really interested in any of the side stuff besides the Triple Triad game. This Triple Triad stuff is really fun, and maybe once I start paying a subscription, I'll get to play with other players, because I think that would be really fun. Because the Triple Triad, when you have the free trial, you can only challenge NPCs. You can't challenge other players. And then as far as like trying other MMOs, I've thought about trying EverQuest. I downloaded that on my laptop, and then there's a game, I believe it's called Meridian 20. It's either Meridian 20 or Meridian 30. That is like one of the very first MMOs, and it's got like a Daggerfall sort of feel to it. And I was like, that one looks really cool. Like, I love the aesthetic of older games, and I'm excited to eventually check that one out. I also downloaded that one off of Steam, and that one's free, by the way. And then there's one coming out, I think, later this year, assuming that they don't postpone it some more, called Chrono Odyssey, that I think it looks really cool. And I've thought about doing a video on that. I might do that at some point. But that one looks really, really neat. I keep joking that's like, oh, it's the next Chrono game that they've been waiting for since the PS1 era, but it's not related to Square Enix or Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross in any way other than it just has Chrono in the name, and I'm sure that was unintentional. Um, but yeah, I've enjoyed delving into MMOs. I think the big thing is I would love to have somebody to play with, like a friend or a family member that would be up for it. But it's also a time sink. Um, so Final Fantasy 11 is definitely the one that I would want to get a friend or somebody to regularly play with. But it's hard to ask in this day and age. Like, hey, can you pay? Would you be willing to pay $12 a month for an MMO that's almost 20 years old? And people are like, why isn't it free to play? But the thing is, I think that the gamer base for 11 is really passionate, and the people that are there want to be there. I think if you had a bunch of free players playing, then you would get spam accounts and all that. I think at the very least, what they should do is they should drop the subscription down to $10, and then extend the free trial to level 10. Personally, but at the very least, I think that it should be discounted to $10 a month. Especially if you're already subscribed to 14, I think that 11 should be discounted. But that's just me. So hopefully, I'll have somebody to play 11 along with, because when UFF was talking about playing Final Fantasy 11, the sounded like the best parts was them playing with each other and then also playing with people that were listening along with the show. But regardless, I really enjoy playing along with people in my link shell, which is like a group that you can join within the game, and then just running into people and them either just offering me good gear out of left field, because it's clear that I'm a very new player, and it's hard being a new player to Final Fantasy 11, let alone having very little to no MMO experience to begin with. But I'm enjoying it so far, and I'm hoping to get more into it, and hopefully find some other people to play with as well. Thanks for listening. Check out my streams. I've been streaming Final Fantasy 14 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll be back playing 11 after I finish A Realm Reborn. Take care.